Tell me how you happened upon the script and when you read it, how it spoke to you.
Well, the way actually it was presented to me by one of the producers, a guy named Joey Didio, and the original idea for this script, I'd love to say it was mine, but it wasn't. It was actually the other producer, Janet Karras, and Janet Karras is a ballroom enthusiast. She's not a professional dancer, but she loves to compete in ballroom dance competitions, and she's done so all around the world. And so this was sort of an idea that she's had for a long time, because she also is very involved in disabled charities that involve people with disabilities, especially spinal cord disabilities. So combining her love of ballroom dancing with her interest and desire to help people with disabilities, that's sort of how the script got. That was kind of the origin of the concept. And then the script was sent to me, and it was originally written by a guy named Marty Madden. And I read it, and I liked so many things about it, but I also felt like I wanted to put my own little twist in there. And the things that are interesting to me was that, I'm a New Yorker, and I love stories about New York, and I love the diversity of New York characters. So trying to, find material or a story that had, just a great portrait of all the diversity of New York was something that really attracted me to the project, and why I wanted to make it, quite frankly.
Did you have any knowledge at all about this culture, the kind of wheelchair ballroom? Yeah.
I didn't. I like dancing. I dance around my house, but I'm certainly not a professional dancer. And I've caught Dancing with the Stars on TV, but I knew very little about ballroom dance. But once I got involved with the project, I did go to see some ballroom dance competitions, and was sort of just amazed by the kind of theatricality of it. It just was so visual, the costumes, the music, the choreography, and so I was kind of hooked on just how filmic I thought it could be. And
Absolutely.
The idea of the competitions that I saw were were regular ballroom dance competitions with able-bodied dancers. But I did some research online and saw some videos of wheelchair ballroom dance competitions, which for people who, like myself, who knew nothing about it originally, it involves an able-bodied partner with somebody in a wheelchair. So it's not two people in wheelchairs, it's this combination. And when I saw these tapes, particularly of competitions in South America and in Europe, because it really isn't known here in the U.S., I was just sort of amazed and thought it made a wonderful subject matter, and it would be great also to introduce this to American audiences.
I think so too, and it does make for a kind of a wonderful setting to your movie. And I've attended some ballroom competitions in the past too, and I was struck exactly by the same aspects that you were. There's this sense of elegance and theatricality, as you say, and it's almost like stepping back in time in a way when you watch them perform. It has kind of a magical quality to it.
It does, because there's a lot of rituals and protocol and etiquette to the whole thing, not just the dancing, but the whole performance and the judging and the way people watch. It's got just a wonderful, old-fashioned yet very vibrant and alive and contemporary now with today's audience's interest in ballroom competitions and dance competition. But it's pretty fascinating.
Another thing that I really appreciated about your movie, and I don't think we have enough movies with this feeling to it, it's so kind of good-hearted, and I find that a lot of films when they try for that feeling, they can turn out kind of maudlin or movie of the weekish, and I find that your films and someone like Cameron Crowe is really very good at kind of towing that line. Is that establishment of tone, how challenging is that to achieve?
It is challenging. I mean, one of the things that when I first read this script, and there was, again, so much about the original script that I liked, but it is about a dancer who has an accident and ends up in a wheelchair permanently, and about a young man who's from the Bronx, a Puerto Rican young guy from the Bronx who is infatuated with her and decides to try to get her involved in this wheelchair ballroom dance competition, just to try to make her want to enjoy life again and want to dance again. And I thought, as much as there were so many things about it I liked, I knew that it could be melodramatic if I didn't, I had to kind of find a tone that didn't tip the movie into melodrama in a bad way. So that to me was something I was very aware of right from the start. And I also knew that I wanted to try to keep a little bit of grittiness in the film, in the way it was filmed, in the way I wanted to try to capture New York City, to try to tip it away from being a TV movie of the week or a bad melodrama.
But from a practical level, when you're trying to achieve just the right tone, when you do certain takes with actors, do you have them perform at various pitches? So when you go in the editing room, it's easier to calibrate that tone?
A little of that, but I think it's really about just trying to, when you're looking at the overall story, trying to inject enough moments of humor or of outrageousness or a little bit of something to play against the melodrama, whether it's by introducing unique characters or trying to get some New York City bite into it. That was more of how I thought about playing against, what I didn't, a soap opera quality that I didn't want the movie to have.
Right.
So for example, like, the various characters in the rehab center that eventually join in this ballroom, wheelchair ballroom dance competition. One of them is a sassy, transgendered paraplegic. It was kind of an odd combination, and I knew that character could give some of, a kind of sassiness and bite to some of the scenes that could tip it out of soap opera.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think you were so successful in avoiding those traps that you can often find in a story of this nature. I mean, I thought it was a beautifully done movie. When you look at the theme of this movie, do you find parallels with the themes you've explored in your previous works?
Well, I do, because I think that this movie had several underdog characters, and I've always sort of liked underdog characters, or people who on the surface are, people who are underneath, different than who they appear to be on the surface. So, when we see people in wheelchairs, we don't think of them as ballroom dancers or dancers of any sort necessarily. Mm-hmm. So combining, people with spinal cord injuries with ballroom dancing, there was a kind of instant contrast in that I liked, which I've tried to do in some of my other films, or having characters that were contrasting. The leading man in this character is a Puerto Rican guy who works at his family's restaurant in the Bronx, and the woman he's sort of the leading lady is a kind of Upper East Side blonde, waspy woman who, you know, is from a rich uptown family. Again, that kind of contrast. And when I look at some of my past films, whether it's, you know, going back to Desperately Seeking Susan, again, it's two very different kinds of women that you kind of push together into the same story. Or,
right.
You know, in the case of certainly the Rosanna Arquette character in Desperately Seeking Susan, she feels, you know, one way inside, and yet she, you know, inside she feels like she's, you know, Madonna, or wants to be this kind of, you know, woman having this great adventure, and on the outside she's living the life of a suburban housewife in New Jersey. So
right.
contrasting characters are something that's always interested me.
And those contrasts are really the very definition of drama, I find. But I'm curious to know from you, in your career as a filmmaker, have you often felt like the underdog in any way?
Well, I have. I mean, in some ways, that's something I like. I mean, because I you know, whenever I probably one of the reasons I stay in New York and stay a New York filmmaker as opposed to an LA filmmaker is because I like viewing the world from a somewhat of an outsider's perspective. I guess that's what I mean by underdog, sort of viewing the world as an outsider. And I think, you know, certainly after Desperately Seeking Susan, I had my chance, had I wanted to go to Los Angeles and been, you know, fit right into the studio system. It was available to me, but somehow there was something about staying in New York and being a part of the filmmaking community, but, you know, dipping my feet into the studio world, but also being able to pull back and still feel like an independent filmmaker, that just felt comfortable for me as a person.
Well, because that environment fits your particular voice as a filmmaker, and I'm always fascinated whenever I study directors' works or speak to directors on the show about something that I want to ask you about. When you, because a lot of times things are clearer in retrospect than they are when we're in the midst of it. When do you feel like you found your own unique voice as a filmmaker?
Well, weirdly enough, I think that my voice, I mean, it's, you know, it changes with project to project because each project has its own tone. But the projects that I liked the best, or the ones that I felt were most personal to me, were the ones starting with Smithereens, my first movie, which again has that, you know, outsider's voice. That's a story of a girl from, you know, a boring suburb in New Jersey that goes to New York City to get involved in the sort of punk new wave culture of that time. This was the early 80s. And again, because she sort of has that need to, you know, to step out of the world she grew up in to enter into another world. So that theme, or that part of my voice, which, you know, maybe I keep telling some variation of the same story over and over again, but maybe that's the story I want to tell, you know?
You know what? I think that all artists do that, though, even if they're not aware of it. I mean, you look at somebody like Woody Allen, and he's worked on adjustments of the same theme for 40 years. I mean, it's always fascinating. He always finds different aspects to it.
Right.
But it is interesting to me what artists tend to gravitate towards, Yeah.
And those are the artists, I mean, the people like, you know, the Woody Allens or the Scorseses or Spike Lees or Tarantino's tend to be the directors that I like the most because I can feel their personal obsessions in their work. And I guess, you know, some people might call that a limitation of sort, but I see it as something that, you know, you're just still working on your theme, whatever your theme is, you know.
I couldn't agree more. You know, and you mentioned Smithereens, and that was 82, and didn't you go to Cannes with that film?
I did, yeah. That was kind of a surprise because that was a film I did after I graduated from NYU Film School back when film schools weren't quite as popular as they are these days. And it was a film that I made with the crew of people that I had met as a film student. And we just did this little film, really not thinking about what it would get us or where it would go or how we would even, what kind of audience it would have. We just made it in a kind of, let's make a movie, let's put on a show kind of way. I think everyone was really surprised that it ended up in competition, actually, at the Cannes Film Festival.
And it was, it's not like today. I mean, today, independent film has become an entire movement. Anyone can get a hold of a camera, practically. But in '82, it was a lot more rare. When you embarked on this world of independent filmmaking, were there filmmakers that you looked upon as kind of the template for you?
Well, the filmmakers that I always liked the most at that time, again, coming out of film school, were the European filmmakers. I mean, I loved, Godard and Truffaut in the French New Wave and the Italian neo-realists of the 50s. And then when I was a film student, the German filmmakers, Fassbender and Wim Wenders, Herzog, started to make these amazing films. So that, during my film school years, those were the people that I really respected and kind of, modeled myself on in some weird way. Although the weird thing was there was no female film directors. There were a few Europeans. I remember there was one woman at the time, Lena Wertmuller, who did some amazing films in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, maybe early 80s. But in terms of American female film directors, the only one I had ever heard of was Ida Lupino, and I didn't even know that many of her films. So, it was a little bit of forging new territory and trying to sort of figure it out as I was sort of doing it, without much of a roadmap.
It's interesting too, because another filmmaker that comes to mind in the independent realm before you got started was Cassavetes, a filmmaker that really kind of made his own rules. And you worked with, one of the most frequent collaborators of Cassavetes in Peter Falk.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm always fascinated by Peter Falk. He was always such a likable presence in films. What was the experience of working with him like?
Well, he was a really interesting guy because he's a wonderful actor. He's a little eccentric as a person, which makes the process interesting. But what I think is wonderful about him is he has this. There's something so real about, and real in an unusual way about the way he approaches a character. But I think that's also in part a reflection of, he really is unique as a person. He was a unique and very quirky and distinctive, everything from his voice to his quirky mannerisms to his little eccentricities that he gives to a character, I think are somewhere, pulled from his own inner core.
Yeah, you don't. He's memorable. You don't forget Peter Falk. That's the truth. But in terms of acting, you've worked with actors of all types and various stages of their career. I mean, from Madonna being a newcomer at the time to Meryl Streep being the most established, greatest actress alive when you worked with her, all the way to musical chairs, where I would imagine you're working with several first-timers. A big challenge of directing must be to adjust your approach to whatever an individual actor's needs might be, I would think. Absolutely. I mean, with someone, when you work with somebody like Meryl Streep, I can't begin to, she knows who the character is. She comes to the set prepared. We have, conversations ahead of time in the script stage, but by the time she's on set,
I'm more or less directing around her, the other people around her, because or modulating a little bit, like let's push the comedy here a little bit or bring it down here. But basically, I can't teach her about acting, so that's a different approach to working with your actors. When you're working with somebody like newer actors, you're not being an acting coach, but you are helping them figure out the performance. You're working in a more collaborative way to figure out the performance. And then with some people, you're hoping that, it's not about acting. It is about acting, but it's also about trying to get their persona on screen. For example, like with Madonna, or even with I worked in Smithereens with this sort of punk rock musician, Richard Hell. There was something about him as a person and Madonna as a person that I thought was really interesting, that I didn't want to lose. So my job as a director was to get the thing that I thought was interesting about them into the character that they were playing. So it's very different than working, for example, with an actress like Rosanna Arquette or Peter Falk or Judy Davis, for example.
Well, and you want, and every actor kind of wants that situation where they and the character can kind of merge. And I know as a director, what you're saying is you want to bring out some quality of that actor in every performance that you pull from them. But when you're working with independent film like Musical Chairs, I would imagine that it's a shorter film schedule, a shooting schedule than you would have liked, and every director wants more time. But how do you establish a level of comfort and familiarity? Is there a rehearsal time that you allow before shooting?
Yeah, I think that was one of the really interesting things that part of the rehearsal process of Musical Chairs. And interestingly enough, I'm just finishing up a new film called The Hot Flashes, which is a basketball film that had the same thing going on, which is that the actors, both are ensemble movies, and in both cases, the actors had to come together to learn a new skill. And there's something really wonderful about learning something new, and especially if it's a physical task, like ballroom dancing or playing basketball, because you're doing all the things that actors need to do, like bonding and learning who your character is, but it's in the context of learning something very specific, this very specific task, this new skill. And I think what it does is it makes the actors bond in a certain way without building up any walls or because they're all a little intimidated by this new task, and so they all sort of join forces to learn it and do it. And we had, in the case of Musical Chairs, we did have 4 weeks of dance rehearsal. And in the beginning, it was, I was a little nervous because I wasn't there for all the rehearsals. We had choreographers, and Janet Karras, the producer, was very involved in the ballroom side of things. But when I first when I was at the first rehearsal, I was a little nervous because these people were not cast specifically for their dancing skills. And I thought, a dance movie with, awkward dancers could be, this could be difficult. But I think that they were all so determined to learn this new skill. And they were all starting out at the same place, which means that none of them were professional dancers, that it really made them comfortable with each other, which is part of the goal. You want to feel like people who like each other in the film also, it's great if they really like each other off screen as well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful dynamic because I would think usually that when an actor prepares, it's kind of a situation where they're isolated most of the time when they're doing their preparation, but to form that sense of camaraderie in a group setting when you're preparing is beautiful.
Right. I think that's one of the hardest things, because I've also worked on some like TV movies for like Showtime, for example, and often you get such a short rehearsal period. Literally, the actors come to the location, wherever that is, maybe a week ahead of time. You have a chance for maybe a table read, and most of the pre-production week you have with them is spent, in wardrobe fittings or hair and makeup tests or whatever, that you get very little time for them to get to know each other and for everyone to really feel relaxed and comfortable. So sometimes it takes, a week or two into shooting till everyone begins to warm up.
Right.
But now I understand why a lot of directors like to work with the same cast over and over again. I mean, look at somebody like Mike Leigh, who uses the same cast to kind of improvise his, screenplays and work with him in developing them because of that comfort level.
Yeah. When you have shown this musical chairs in various festivals and screenings, what's been the most surprising or delightful reaction you've enjoyed from audiences?
Well, it's got a really the ending is very strong and emotionally strong, and seeing having audiences spontaneously sort of applaud and stand up at the end has been amazing, and I think I'm not saying it's because the film is so great as much as it is that it's so emotionally, the ending pulls at your emotions in a way that I think makes people respond so strongly at the end.
Is it a challenging moment for you when you unveil your baby to a festival audience for the first time? Is that still nerve-wracking for you?
It is. It is. I think, because by the time I'm done the editing process, I'm kind of numb. I don't know what's working, what's not working. I try to remember what I liked originally, but sometimes, it's hard to know whether you like something or don't like something because of you're bored with it, or you like the actors, so you think you like the character. So the first time you show it to a festival audience, or in some cases, an audience like a test audience, you're seeing it through their eyes suddenly. So when I'm watching, I'm often watching the audience more than I'm watching the movie, just to see what's working, what's not. I'm a big believer that it's great to before you go to a festival to try to test it out on some audiences, and not just your friends, because your friends can be nice, but just regular audiences, and just watch where, I just sit there and feel what I'm feeling as I'm watching them. Am I squirming? Am I wishing I could get through the scene faster? Am I relaxing because I'm feeling that people are totally with the characters?
I love the movie, like I told you before, and I love all your movies. I'm so grateful to you for the work you've done. I mean, that your movies have had a place in my life. So, I mean, it's been a big thrill to speak to you. Before I let you go, upcoming screenings or events that you're excited about with musical chairs, where our audience could possibly find it?
Well, the next big event, we were nominated for a GLAAD Media Award, and that's on, I think it's March 16th. Well, I'm thrilled to be nominated, and we're going to go to that ceremony, so that's kind of exciting. And the main goal now with musical chairs is, we're trying to get it, we're talking to distributors in Europe and in Latin America. I think it's a movie that Latin American territories will like. So, that's our goal, and we have a sales agent who's out there trying to get it, out. And we have a VOD offer. I'm not going to tell you what company it is yet, because just in case it doesn't go through, but it looks like it is. So we're hoping that it'll be out in VOD which, the reality is that's how most people get to see independent films these days. So hopefully it'll be coming to a TV near you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the VOD is a terrific avenue for independent film now. I mean, it really gets it out there in a way you're not allowed much anymore in cinema screens.
It is weird because there used to be a real snobbery, especially as a filmmaker. You wanted to see your film up on a big screen, but I think the dynamic has changed considerably, especially over this past year, and in part it is because of the reality is most people do watch movies at home, and TVs have gotten bigger. And now you have access to all these VOD channels and Netflix on demand and all that kind of stuff. So the distribution, the world of distribution and theater, movie exhibition has changed totally in the last year. And you have to kind of embrace it because that's reality.
Well, last question for you. Of course, the matter of distribution and getting your film seen and the kind of certain aspects of independent filmmaking has changed over the years from when you first started. But has your appreciation or enjoyment of what you do, has that changed or matured at all over the years?
Well, I still love movies. I still love watching them. I still go to movie theaters rather than watch everything on VOD. Again, it's one of the things I love about my job, and I feel so lucky about, is that each new movie is like a new adventure. And I guess I feel a little bit still like, the character of Wren in Smithereens or Rosanna Arquette in Desperately Seeking Susan, the sense of Alice in Wonderland. Where is the white rabbit? Where can I follow that white rabbit, and what new adventure am I going to pop up into? And truly, every new movie has its own dynamic and its own family, the actors that you bond with, and so in that way it doesn't get stale, although the technology has changed so radically over the 28 years I've been making movies, with new digital cameras and all kinds of CGI and everything else. But
in the end, it's still about telling a great story. I mean, I think that should never change. And and you've told some great ones in your career, and I love your movies so much, and I've so enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie. Pleasure was mine.